Hey Beth, I have a story for you. It has the magic of birthday energy, the push and pull of a new relationship, and one of those text conversations that leaves you crying in the airport bar. It's a misconnection. Welcome to Misconnections. We're both Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth Villa, aka Lizzy.
And I'm Elizabeth Wyndham, aka Beth.
Misconnections is a podcast that explores the longing to connect and the circumstances that stand in our way.
Each episode will bring a true story of a misconnection and an expert guest to help us unpack it so that we can all get better at making real, meaningful connections that feel good to us.
That's why we started this show. After a series of our own misconnections in dating, friendships, and family relationships, we decided to get some help. So Beth, are you ready to hear this misconnection story?
Bring on the birthday magic.
I knew you'd say that. Here's the story. If I were to tell you that I have extraordinary birthday energy, would you know what I mean? Do you have the same power? It's energetic and physical. It's spiritual and practical. It's intoxicating, and it's annual, and it's my favorite thing. As the calendar turns and my birthday month arrives, something shifts slightly in my interior world. Like a breeze that tickles your cheek, gently alerting you to locate your scarf or your sweater. Time itself tells me that I need to get ready because something is brewing. Birthday energy is brewed in a cauldron of confidence and charisma and charm that bubbles out of me and onto everyone I come in contact with on June 6th. I met you on my birthday 6 years ago. You were sitting at the table next to me, and what I would eventually learn was not just my favorite cafe, but our favorite cafe. You were sitting alone, reading Walt Whitman and brooding, with a charming ascot tied around your neck, whimsically paired with a threadbare sweatshirt. My friend had momentarily excused herself for the restroom, so I, in my birthday energy, leaned over to you, placing my hand purposefully on top of yours, and said, "You've got great fucking taste in poetry." My fingers lingered for a moment, while your initial startled expression settled into a moment of sustained eye contact. And then I slowly exhaled and withdrew my attention. My friend came back to the table, and at this point, the memory feels fuzzy, and I don't know who picked up the thread of conversation. But over the next few hours, we had joined our tables and shared a communal chocolate croissant and countless cups of coffee. You and I were finishing each other's sentences, and when we weren't talking over each other, you were pausing to make notes in your phone of delicious things that I said that you wanted to remember. We had mutual friends. We'd been in the same concerts and restaurants and bars, but never met before that moment. And in that moment, or rather the series of moments of meeting you, I was also meeting something in myself. Something in me felt more real now that I knew you. Do you know that scene in The Velveteen Rabbit? The mic drop moment? Real isn't how you are made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. We had just met, but in a wild way that I can only attribute to the magic and mystery of birthday energy, I felt the depth and breadth of a lifetime of relationship with you in my mind, but not in my imagination. I felt it in my memory. We three walked out of the cafe together, and the next time you and I shared space over coffee and pastries, we didn't invite my friend. First, it was coffee, then a makeshift picnic in the park, lunch on a lunch break, breakfast before a flight, the museum, the diner, the cafe, the bar. And then you told me your best friend from the East Coast was coming to town and earnestly asked if I was ready to meet them. The silly thing was, my best friend was coming into town from the West Coast the next week, and I was just about to ask the same question. Yes, I'm ready. Yes, me too. Every conversation was as easy and effervescent as the first. Until they weren't. All of a sudden, every conversation was enigmatic. Where for 3 months prior, there had been reciprocity, there was resistance in its stead. Availability, emotional, physical, calendrical, disappeared, disapparated. You weren't ghosting me. It was somehow worse. You were pulling away from me in an equal and opposite measure to all the ways that you'd been moving toward me. The magic of birthday energy long dissipated. My confidence devolved into confusion and insecurity. Plans were canceled and not rescheduled. Messages were left unread. The skin horse tells the velveteen rabbit that when you are real, you don't mind being hurt. That is not my experience. The next weekend rolled around, and your best friend rolled into town. And I never heard from you. Not Thursday, not Friday, not Saturday. And I was flying out for work on Sunday. As I'm driving to the airport, my phone pings with a message to say, "Hey, how are you?" How am I? Confused, insecure, hurt. What do my fingers communicate? I'm fine. Heading to the airport for my flight. I'll be gone for a week. Oh my God, me too. I'm on the train with Jessica right now. We should be at the airport in about 30 minutes. This is it. The chance to get back on track, to make the connection, to meet the best friend, to make up for the weekend. How am I? Excited, nervous, squealing. What do my fingers communicate? Cool. Maybe we can see each other and I can meet Jessica after all. It would be so nice to at least grab a squeeze before I leave. I exit the highway. I check the time. I pull into the airport parking lot. I check the time. I heave and hoe some heavy suitcases. I check the time. I ride the shuttle. I stare at my phone and I check the time. I'm here, just checking my bags. Let me know when y'all arrive. I'm in the main concourse. I slide my phone in my purse to use the restroom, having made the mistake of dropping my phone in a toilet on a previous work trip. And by the time I've washed my hands and unlocked the keypad, a message has arrived. Oh, sorry, the return train pulled up and I had to jump on. I'm not feeling great, so I'm gonna go home, get some rest before work tomorrow. How am I? Humiliated. I find a bar and grab a drink, but it turns out I already couldn't feel my face. I didn't even notice the tears tickling my cheek until the water smudged the receipt I needed to keep for our accountant. I head to the gate and realize that Jessica and I are on the same flight. We make eye contact, and there is no recognition. Of what use was it to be loved and lose one's beauty and become real if it all ended like this? And a tear, a real tear, trickled down his little shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground.
So, Beth, how do you feel after hearing this story?
Goodness, I feel like I could write a dissertation on my feelings about the story. I will refrain and just talk about a few points.
All right, let's hear it.
One, the way I joined the storyteller and felt that embarrassment when she sees the best friend on our flight. I feel like it uniquely highlights what it's like to date in this day and age. in the inquiry of your love interest, aka research on Instagram, you've seen the photo of the best friend. Mm-hmm. They've most likely seen you, but yet you awkwardly have never met. So weird. Besides that, this story really reminds me and makes me think about the experience where I have had where differences in communication styles take time to notice. It's evident that this wasn't like a 3-date and a ghost situation. This was a months-long relationship. And it's devastating when the differences can't be resolved or the person you're dating isn't as invested in figuring that out like you are. It kind of like reminds me of 500 Days of Summer, that movie where when the relationship falls apart, you truly begin to investigate why, how, when, when did this happen? Because hearing that beginning part of the story, it just seems like so lovely and something that we all desire, where it's this kismic meeting and then you can build upon that. The other thing that I want to kind of just acknowledge about the story is that this Misconnections was actually written by our storyteller. And I just want to thank her for her willingness to put her experience on paper. And we're rooting for her wherever she is on her love journey and relationship journey.
Yeah, we are.
So Lizzy, I'm dying to know your thoughts around the story.
Well, I feel like I want to call this person up and ask him what the heck. I'm obviously not going to do that because, of course, that wouldn't be fair. We're only telling one side of the story, and it wouldn't be in the spirit of Misconnections necessarily. But I say that to say that I really relate to the storyteller and have experienced what feels like a cycle.
Yeah.
What I would say is far too many times. It's really fun and exciting to have instant chemistry with someone. And for that to spark, almost like a fantasy of a future that most certainly is waiting for you.
Yeah.
Together. And I think I have been dating for long enough now that when I hear stories like this, I'm like, that's not going to stick. No way. But there's no denying that it feels really good. And I think it just feels good to connect with someone that, especially when you get to meet someone in real life, when a lot of our dating lives today happen on dating apps, and that can have its own disillusionment on its own. So I think it feels exciting to have that kind of instant chemistry. And I think it sucks for that to slowly dwindle away in a way that we don't understand. Mm-hmm. I feel the anxiety that our storyteller describes as she starts to notice that shift in their communication and the way they're making plans. And I relate to that experience of kind of feeling almost like an observer to what's happening and being like, wait, what? If I can only get this text back, then it will mean that we can get back to that magical place that we were in for just a short period of time. And I really relate also to the way that she's going back and forth from kind of denying how she's feeling in their communication. So he's saying oh, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, which is, again, kind of crossing your fingers and hoping those bad feelings go away and you can get back into that magical place. And I really feel the disappointment as she gets confirmation that they really aren't there anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's done and that has changed. So dating these days can be really fun. I will say that. And it can also be really hard. And I don't think anyone who's dating right now would disagree. But we keep doing it because of whatever our motivations are, one of which is because we desire romantic connection. So for this next part of this episode, we're going to bring in a special guest to talk to us about how we can continue getting better at doing just that. Damona Hoffman is a celebrity dating coach, author of F the Fairy Tale, host of the award-winning podcast Dates and Mates, and the official love expert of the Drew Barrymore Show. She has written dating columns for the LA Times and the Washington Post and worked as a dating expert and spokesperson for top dating apps including OkCupid, Match, and Bumble. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and 2 children. Welcome to Misconnections, Damona.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome. We are so excited to have you, Damona. We need your help to talk about this story.
Clearly, we are not experts at this.
So first, before we go into kind of the greater conversation, we'd love to know, how are you feeling about this story? What's coming up for you?
Oh, wow. It felt so familiar, and it's such a well-written story where I really felt like I got caught up in the momentum. The way that the storyteller got caught up in the momentum of falling in love.
Sure.
I hear from a lot of my clients and my Dates and Mates listeners about how easy it is to get sort of pulled into that vortex, and how challenging it is also, as you said earlier, Lizzy, when you don't have clarity, when you don't know the why, that makes it so much harder to process.
Yeah.
I'm such an optimist, and this is coming from me originally being a love cynic, which I talk about in F the Fairy Tale. Now I'm really a love optimist. And to me, I actually heard a lot that I was hopeful about in the story, just because to have that connection, to have any connection today, and to have those moments, that's really, really special. And it's unfortunate that it ended the way it did. And of course, not every connection that you have is going to end up with you walking off into the sunset together. But I try to get my listeners and my readers to focus on those moments of goodness and how you were able to open up, be authentic, be vulnerable, and share space with another human. I loved the quote that the storyteller brought in from the Velveteen Rabbit. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. And I know she said that she couldn't really subscribe to that. I don't know that it's that anyone would not mind being hurt, but I think it's really falling in love is about knowing that being hurt is one potential outcome and moving through it bravely anyway.
Yeah.
My therapist said at one point, because I was like, how do I keep doing this? And she said, resilience that you know that you're going to be okay, and that you know that the moments that you're having on this journey are worth it in and of themselves, not necessarily outcome oriented, but they're all teaching you something, sure, growing, yes, but like, what a lovely story that this person tells of a connection that they clearly really enjoyed and valued. And I think that that is worth something. And it's very common for us to be like, well, we're going to just throw that away because of the way that it ended. And that we get to look at things a little bit more nuanced. And I think that's one of the things that's hard about dating today, is that through like app dating culture, and this is one of the things that I brought up to Beth when we were starting this podcast, was after a relationship that I had ended, I was like, I keep finding myself in this cycle of kind of, we feel like we're in this evaluation stage and then it ends. And what we're missing is like a whole human being standing in front of you that is someone that you get to know. And I'm fine with the ending. Like you said, like nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to be rejected, sure. But what I'm not okay with is being in these situations where you get hurt, you get rejected, but you're never seen, or you don't get to be known.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or don't get to have a real connection. So I love to start with maybe just like naming big picture. Maybe I'm just biased because I'm in the throes of dating myself, but why is dating in the pursuit of relationships so hard today? And what is it about today's dating landscape and what you've learned working as a dating coach that led you to write your book, F the Fairy Tale?
Well, I just want to acknowledge, because I hear that phrase that you just said, Lizzy, from a lot of people, like, why is dating so hard today? And I talk about it in F the Fairy Tale, that I actually don't think it's necessarily harder today. I think it's actually far easier today to date and to meet people. However, we are dating at a faster rate. We are in constant communication, as this story even demonstrated, so much of that anxiety came from the change in communication. A lot of that was text communication, was not that authentic in-person connection that they once had or that you were just speaking about. And when we step into this process of dating today at the speed and the changed communication and the constant communication, we are feeling the highs and lows more often and more acutely. So I do think we need to reframe this idea. We've come to believe it to be true that dating is harder today. And we've repeated it and repeated it. And the more we repeat it, the more that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy for us. So if instead we can change the narrative to dating is different today, or there's so much more possibility for connection today, and I'm excited to find something real, or I'm showing up authentically, I'm showing up empathetically, which I talk about in F the Fairy Tale all the time, then you can get some more of that empathy and that humanity back.
I love that you brought that up, because I really appreciated what you said was your empathy first approach in F the Fairy Tale. And when you were addressing like the lack of trust that most singles have in dating today, you mentioned that we're facing a breakdown in empathy with daters. And I loved a specific quote that you had, which was, empathy, being able to understand and share the feelings of another, is rarely applied in dating. Leading with empathy separates us from the transactional nature of meeting someone online and shifts us toward trying to understand those we meet. If we take a step back from being the protagonist in our love story and instead look at the story from another character's point of view, the read becomes much more interesting. And I love that reframe, like you were saying, on our approach to dating. And I'm curious to know how approaching dating with empathy can change a dater's experience. So obviously you can't control what you get back, but how can that change the experience for what they're putting out into that process?
Well, the empathy first approach that I talk about is really twofold. It is both empathy outward for the person that you're meeting and empathy inward as well. So it makes me curious, like in the question, in the story that we heard, how does the outcome change through an empathetic lens of like, what was the other person going through that created this outcome? And this could end up, we could take this very far if we wanted to, but is there some sense of closure for the storyteller in being able to flip the perspective instead of, this is how this happened, rather than this is what happened to me? Like you said, changing the point of view, changing the narrator, and this is just what happened.
Sure.
And we can regain a little bit of dignity too in the dating process when we look at it from that way. And it really completely shifts how people show up in dates, in in-person meeting, when you look at it through an empathetic lens and you can get some of that humanity back. Like you were saying, it is a little bit of a cycle. It is going to be a cycle. It always has been a cycle of dating until you find a person that you really want to invest in. And people drop off at different points in that cycle. But if you show up fully, empathetically, and like I just did an exercise at a book launch event last night where I asked people to share a dream that they had for 2024. And then I asked their partners to listen empathetically and respond with the three senses, I call it, to say, I see, I hear, I feel when that person speaks. And everybody said after the exercise how it really changed the way that they were listening when they're not just listening for facts and context and compatibility or whatever, when they were really listening from all of their senses and from their whole body. And it's really cool to see how listening in that way and approaching dates in that way completely changes the trajectory of your experience from that point on.
Yeah. It's almost as if this mindset of empathy first approach is an act of harm reduction, in a sense, because you're choosing to have dignity for yourself and still, unless this person really does you dirty, have respect for that other human, despite that the connection wasn't a lasting connection or, going further on whatever relationship escalator or timeline that you were hoping for when it initially started. That mind shift really is beautiful because there's no longer the binary of good and bad when things fall apart.
Yeah.
And it really does allow humanity to be, still sacred in the midst of that, however long it is.
That was such a brilliant button to put on what I just said, like and synopsis of really so much that I've written about in F the Fairy Tale. I have a core belief, and people can write in and disagree with me, but my core belief is that people are doing their best most of the time.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, their best is not necessarily what's best for you, but they're doing the best they can with what they have at that moment. And that has really shifted my interactions with people. And even though I've been married 16 years, I have my own disappointments in relationships and friendships. And that's the first thing that I do when I have an interaction like that's frustrating or disappointing. I remind myself, well, this person is doing their best. And so how does that change the way that I respond or react or what I hold on to? And it's just so crucial in dating today with the speed, as I was talking about, with the speed that it's happening. We have to be responsible for, like you said, our own harm reduction. We have to be able to both open our hearts and protect ourselves. And I realize that is a lot. That may be why dating also feels harder today, because we are showing up more vulnerable. We are showing up more authentically. It is less transactional than it was a generation ago. And you're looking for somebody that's really like a deep match on multiple levels. And that does require you to show up in a different way.
One of the dating myths that you name in your book is the chemistry myth, which can leave us chasing after butterflies, a spark, and instant chemistry and new connections. Just thinking about that makes me excited. But why do we believe so strongly?
It's a myth, Beth.
I know, it's a myth.
I'm not saying chemistry isn't real. No. I'm just saying that chemistry doesn't, as we saw in this story, lead to long-term compatibility necessarily.
So why do we so strongly believe in the power of chemistry? What are the potential pitfalls, and how do we begin to start thinking beyond that instant connection, that chemistry butterfly spark?
Well, we are all the product of the stories that we've heard.
Yeah.
The rom-coms we've watched, the fairy tales we've read that said, Cinderella and the prince locked eyes, and from that moment on, he would follow her to the ends of the earth to find his bride. And we want that because it's a great story. Mm-hmm. But it's a story. Mm-hmm. It's a fantasy. And chemistry, it's not that it's not real. Sure. I believe that you can have a true connection. But when people tell me it's love at first sight, 70% of people believe in love at first sight. How? How?
Do not know.
Because how can you love me if you just met me? You don't know me yet. You can have lust at first sight, and often you do. And many times that thing that we're feeling, that connection that we have, is a hardwired response from something else, from a rom-com we watched, from our family of origin, from an ex that we had. They're a lingering remnant of a prior story. Yeah. And we're responding to that and thinking that that means a future with this person. And what I do in the book and with my clients is shift from chemistry to curiosity, because that curiosity, that's an endless well that you can always go back to. And you don't get to a 16-year marriage based on chemistry, but I am still curious about the way my husband looks at the world. I'm curious what he thinks about my viewpoints. I'm just curious about the adventure that we're on. And that is what will take us into the future and what will take all of the listeners today into a relationship that really can stand the test of time and have a better ending, have even a better ending than like a happily ever after.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I loved about how you wrote about chemistry in your book is how you said it was a familiarity, that, that chemistry is really where somebody feels familiar. And in a lot of ways that creates safety, right? You feel familiar, you create a safety in a sense. And from that, you're supposed to kind of like build off of that. But what I also love hearing you say right now is that curiosity is more expanding than familiarity. Like, you can be familiar and attempt to build trust, and it'll only go so far once familiarity isn't part of it anymore, right? It's the uncharted territory. But if you approach it with curiosity, you're already kind of going into that uncharted territory and having that approach to say, like, okay, through curiosity, how are we going to build trust? And how are we going to see if this relationship will continue to grow into something longer, marriage, whatever, or, a few months, as our story deals with.
Yeah. And in this story, they even acknowledge how they had that familiarity.
Yeah.
We were finishing each other's sentences. And that is something that feels really great in the moment, where you're like, oh, I have this connection with this person. But for me, relationships really are that expansive exploration that you were just talking about. And that through relationships, we can actually learn and grow into the most interesting version of ourselves. And if we're only going based on the familiarity or the instant chemistry and attraction, then I think we're actually robbing ourselves of that discovery and being with someone that expands us beyond that point where we met them at.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a conversation that I've been having with a lot of friends recently, that they've been saying, I think that I've been kind of looking at chemistry and like instant attraction as an initial rule for starting to pursue something with someone, and then acknowledging that as I spend time with someone, then we'll develop the, more emotional intimacy, curiosity, like that will come. And I think from multiple friends that I was talking to, they were saying like that's really frustrating because it doesn't seem like those two things are always connected. And what would it look like if I explored the curiosity, the building emotional intimacy, the connection, and then look to see how that chemistry built or that attraction grew? How? I was like, how? I know your book talks obviously a lot about like how to start to reframe your mindset around these things. And you also mentioned communication as another counterpoint to that chemistry myth. What are some of the ways that you work with clients to help them kind of reframe that initial approach to evaluating new connections with that shift from instant attraction to maybe something that has a little bit more substance to it, I guess?
Yeah. Starting with chemistry is wholly backwards. And in the book, I mapped all of the myths out based on the phases that I have identified in dating. So there's the mindset phase, there's the search, there's the date, and then there's the future. And the chemistry is at the date phase. So that's like 3 out of 4. If you're starting there, you have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to grow from. You gotta back it up to the beginning. And I started with the list myth because I found that people either didn't have clarity on what they were looking for. They had a list a mile long that no one could clear, or they had the same list that every other person had handed over to me.
Tall, dark, and handsome.
Right? Here's my homework that like I totally cheated my way through chemistry class, you guys, by the way. I don't know, maybe this has something. I was so bad at chemistry.
It's a lingering grudge.
This is a serious reveal that I'm about. Like I'm going to get put in high school jail for saying this. But my friend had all of the I'm not going to say how. My friend had all of the tests. And we just took all of the old tests and we went in and we aced our test based on using the old tests. That's what's happening in dating.
Yes.
Everyone's taking the old tests and being like, here, can I pass on this?
Totally.
Here, he should be 6 feet tall or taller. And he should make this much money and he should live here and he should have this job and he should go to this school. And this is the list. And that doesn't give us the answer. That does not compute. I did pass chemistry, but couldn't do chemistry today.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Who uses chemistry other than people in science and STEM? So there you go.
I'm so nervous. I'm going to get like busted for this now, like 20 something years later. But the actual answer to your question is that we begin with clarity. Mm-hmm. We begin with clarity on what you're looking for. And being able to express that early on, whether it's in your dating profile or on dates, and saying, well, what are you looking for? Yeah. How do you feel about marriage, or how do you feel about a long-term relationship? Do you want kids? What is that goal that you have? Because most daters I see today are caught up in the momentum of dating apps or just being out here, like especially post-pandemic. We're just like, we're here.
Yeah.
Do you remember that first time that you went to Starbucks like during the pandemic and it was like, I am in a place. Yes. Starbucks is so magical. So we're kind of caught up in the magic of just being there. And what I'm asking people to do is to ask, wait, what am I doing here? What did I come here for? What am I looking to buy?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll go home with the whole store. And you'll realize that you didn't even get the thing that you wanted in the first place.
It reminds me of conversations that I've had in the past with friends where like they're in a real living relationship, but the person that they're with doesn't fulfill 3 of their points on the list. So like, should they continue this relationship? And that like made me really sad because you talk about deal breakers and all that stuff, just that reframing, like, can you be fully present in a relationship if you are comparing the human that you're in a relationship based off of what is written on a piece of paper? And I feel like there's just such a struggle with that right now, especially when you have like the polar opposite of like how you approach it, in that there's these like manifestors who are literally like, write down every little detail you want in your partner, think about it, and you will manifest this person, you know? And it's about like you manifesting it in order to like live out what you fully desire. But at the same time, like, you learn what you desire as you're living it in a relationship. You don't actually know all that you desire by yourself outside of a relationship. There's like a discovery. So not that that's a well thought out thought, but I just feel the tension of that, you know, where the list can be limiting based off of this idea of manifesting.
No, I think it is a well thought out point. Because I actually grappled with that when I was writing it. I do believe in manifestation.
Yeah.
But again, I think we're manifesting based on the wrong list, the wrong criteria. So what I do in the book and what I do with my clients is I try to get them into the feeling. So remember I was talking about that exercise. I see, I hear, I feel. What is the feeling of being in that relationship that you imagine for yourself? And what does it look like? What does it feel like? Not what are the boxes that I'm checking? Because you may not recognize that, or you may, as you said, Beth, get years into the relationship and be like, well, I checked the boxes, but I didn't write my name on the paper. You're not going to get credit.
I use a blue pen.
Right.
I think it's in that section of the book where you're talking about how much money somebody makes is maybe what you're getting after is that they are independent, or they offer stability, or they are an equal partner. I think it's like potentially what I'm hearing you say is also like taking that list and like going a few levels deeper.
Yeah.
And saying, what does that mean to you? And also having openness to say, like, is that meaningful to you on a deeper level? Or is that something that, is purely performance or having the right appearing relationship versus how you actually feel in it on a day-to-day basis? And that can be, I think, such a worthwhile experience to have, coming back to the word curiosity, like being curious about yourself and why it is that you desire different attributes from a partner. And if that really is something that's going to bring you fulfillment on a day-to-day basis and not just in the wedding pictures or in the, holiday card or whatever it may be. And is that what you're desiring? Is that sustainable too?
Yeah, I love going a level deeper, as you can probably tell. I love getting under that and saying, okay, wait, why did I put that? Why did I say I need somebody who makes X amount of money? And a lot of times that's like the number is arbitrary. We like somebody else told us and we're like, what? Okay, write that down. How much money? Like I did the same thing. Like I had it in my head. I needed to date a man who is a year to 10 years older. Why? Well, I thought I'm very mature. All of the men that I was meeting who were my age were not mature enough. And so therefore, he must be 1 year to 10 years older. No, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying was I wanted to date someone at my level of maturity.
Yeah.
So at the time I met my husband, I was out here in these streets, y'all. I was also dating somebody who was 10 years older than I am, was immature as you know what. And I met my husband and we're the same age. And I was like, damn, he's got his life together. He'd done all of the work. Yeah. He had the clarity of what he wanted. And he was in a completely different place. And it was instantly obvious to me. I felt that instantly. I was like, oh, this other guy's out. And my husband almost didn't write to me because I had put a year to 10 years older. And he was like, well, I'm the same age. Well, I have a birthday next month. So maybe like she'll let it slide. I don't know.
Like, I don't know how close we're like, paying attention to these rules.
Said this.
Oh,
so
wow.
funny.
Yeah, but we all have our thing
Yeah.
that we need to examine. And like, just to add on to what you were saying about the money, it may not be an external thing.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned a couple of the external factors. It may be, I don't want to feel like everything I've worked for is now being taken by another person. I have invested in my career and there's a loss that I feel in sharing that.
Sure.
Or even just I had prior relationships that showed me this, but what if? I love doing the what if, which you saw probably in the book all the time. What if that wasn't true?
Yeah.
What if everything that you had come to believe based on your past experiences simply wasn't true and you could write it differently? And if you did, how would your life be different? No pressure, though.
Yeah.
I'm inspired.
My brain is spinning.
Yes! That's the goal.
Yeah.
To inspire, to create hope,
Yeah.
to open up possibility.
Yeah. And I think starting the conversation with like, why is this so hard? And getting to a place of feeling more optimistic. Like you said, the way that dating has changed might feel like it's happening faster. You might feel the fallout a little bit more acutely. But there are a lot of ways where there is more opportunity, and developing some of our own resilience, some of our own approach and mindset, which you do such a great job of helping with in the book and throughout this conversation, does give that kind of sense of optimism as well, which I'm sure our listeners will really appreciate. So thank you so much, Damona, for coming on to our podcast. Listeners, be sure to follow Damona on Instagram at Damona Hoffman and visit her website, damonahoffman.com, to explore all of the great things that Damona is working on. And be sure to check out F the Fairy Tale, Rewrite the Dating Myths, and Live Your Own Love Story. We loved it. In F the Fairy Tale, Damona shines a light on the habits and beliefs like instant chemistry and finding the one that are setting us up for failure before we even have a chance to swipe right. She tackles the 4 major dating myths that are derailing singles today: the list myth, the rules myth, the chemistry myth, and the soulmate myth. Instead, she identifies 4 pillars necessary to build lasting relationships: goals, values, communication, and trust, which we so enjoyed talking about today. So thank you so much, Damona, for joining us.
Thank you, Damona.
Thank you. I enjoyed this as well. And I think it's just wonderful to tell the stories and then be open to also rewriting the stories.
Yes.
So thanks for having me.
We want to end this episode by hearing from our amazing storyteller again. We asked her what she thought she missed from this misconnection. She said, "Well, I feel like I missed the memo that indicated how to translate some of his communication trends, but really I was placing my underlying beliefs and unspoken expectations on the relationship. I kept missing the meaning because I was making assumptions at the time that I honestly didn't know I was making. I also missed out on years of friendship and intimacy with my favorite man because I was stuck in an all or nothing container."
That's right, friends. Spoiler alert, they are friends.
We didn't see it coming, but here we are, and we love it.
We love that. Yeah. We also believe that for every misconnection, there can be something gained. Our storyteller said, "I gained some more muscle for boundary and direct communication. Although I wasn't able to garner enough internal stability or ease or groundedness to get curious about what he was experiencing, I was able to get clear on what I wanted and didn't want in a dating relationship. I also got on that plane and landed in that town I was working in and led a 4-day training in the midst of heartbreak, if not very severe heartache. And for the first time, I didn't dissolve my feelings or numb and avoid all of my feelings. Instead, I felt my fucking feelings and still did my job in a competent and skillful way. I gained some adulting gold stars that week. And I gained a perfect Sunday morning story that all my friends can use to remind themselves that they aren't condemned to eternal dissatisfaction on the apps, because sometimes a person can meet one of the loves of their life at the table next door."
Cute.
I want that. This is Missed Connections. Thanks for listening. I'm Elizabeth Wyndham.
And I'm Elizabeth Villa. Special thanks to this week's guest, Damona Hoffman, and our truly amazing storyteller. You know who you are.
This episode's story essay was written by our storyteller and recorded by Rebecca May. It was edited by Charlotte Beach.
Misconnections is co-hosted, produced, and edited by us, the Elizabeths, Elizabeth Villa and Elizabeth Wyndham. Our theme music is Feeling by Daniil Musto.
Have a misconnection story to share with us? Email us at elizabeths@missedconnectionspod.com. And please follow, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.